chapter 12. Hey, let me ask you this question as we go through this today. I want you to at least kind of in the back of your mind, this will be part of it. I want to tie this, or at least this thought in, and then how do you sustain yourself when you are in the middle of crisis? How do you sustain yourself when you're in the middle of difficulty? How do you sustain yourself when you're in the middle of transition or in the middle of transformation? And so this morning, as we take a few moments here in Romans chapter 12, it says this, it says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercies." Now, here's the thing, because I don't have all the time to do this morning, but a lot of times, if you've ever heard, a lot of times you'll read it in the New King James, it'll read it like this, or the King James will say, in fact, I think they've got it up there. I read it to you in NIV. They've got it up here. "I beseech you, therefore, brethren." And I've always heard preachers say this. If you want to know what they're beseeching, you need to find out what it's there for. You need to find, the therefore tells you to go back before it and find out what they're talking about. And I don't want to go all into it, but other than the fact that it says, if you'll put that in NIV for me, it says, I beseech you, brothers, in the view of God's mercies. And what's that talking about? Well, it's actually talking about in Romans chapter 11, in verse 29, or verse 30, it says, "For as you were once disobedient to God, yet have now obtained mercy through their disobedience. Even so, these also have now been disobedient, that through mercy shown you, they also may obtain mercy." In other words, when he's saying, he's writing, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy," in chapter 11, if we want to say it that way, "to offer your bodies as living sacrifices." It's an oxymoron, right? Jumbo shrimp. That's an oxymoron, right? You say you give an adjective, but it doesn't really identify a shrimp. You never anticipate as being jumbo, but they call it jumbo shrimp. When he says a living sacrifice, that doesn't make any sense because a sacrifice dies. So he says, present your bodies as living sacrifices. Holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. And this is really where I want to spend a lot of time, is in this. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Father, I pray today for your anointing. I am anointed in the name of Jesus, and I thank you for it. Lord, I pray that you'd anoint ears to hear, eyes to see, and hearts to understand. Lord, may we receive knowledge and understanding and wisdom. Lord, may your word produce a harvest of righteousness in our lives. And we give you thanks and praise. And everybody that believed it said, amen. All right, a young boy lived in the country. His family had to use an outhouse. Now, last Sunday, I had used the word reconciliation. And it doesn't have anything to do with an outhouse other than this. So I get home, and the smartest of my three kids asked me this question, because the other two weren't smart enough to even ask the question. But no, I'm playing. But the point is, they go, Riker, if y'all don't know who she is, Riker, she's like, "Dad, what's reconciliation?" And I'm like, "What?" And so we had a school lesson last Sunday, and it just made me think that sometimes you use words and you don't think a whole lot about them. And so I used that word last week. To reconcile means to come back and make things. That's not where I want to go. The reason I say that is because outhouse. I want to identify an outhouse. If you're probably below the age of 30 and have never been on a mission trip, you don't know what an outhouse is. What an outhouse is an outhouse is where you go to the bathroom outside. It's outside the house. It's normally a little hut. It's not. You don't have running water. It's normal. Well, it won't get too explicit there, but anyway. So I needed to identify an outhouse, because if you don't know what an outhouse is, you won't get the rest of this story, or maybe not the full context of it. Let me say it like this: an outhouse is kind of like a porta-john. Kind of. But you get the picture. Anyway, his family had to use an outhouse, which the young boy hated. It was hot in the summer, cold in the winter, and always smelly. The outhouse was located near the creek, so the boy decided that he would push it into the water. After a spring rain, the creek swelled, so the boy pushed it in. Later that night, his dad told him that he and the boy needed to make a trip to the woodshed. Now, do I need to explain woodshed? The boy knew this meant punishment. He asked his father, why, to which his dad replied, because someone pushed the outhouse into the creek, and I think that someone was you. Was it? The boy responded that it was. Then he added, remember when George Washington's father asked him if he chopped down the cherry tree? He didn't get in trouble because he told the truth. That is correct, the dad said. But his father was not in the cherry tree when he cut it down. That has nothing to do with my sermon. I just wanted to read it because I thought it was funny. I want to take a few moments this morning, and even in the same thought that we talked about last week of to make him known, I want to take a few moments and share with you, step out to step up. In Romans chapter 12, we see where Paul is charging, encouraging the church, believers. And he makes this statement, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, which I really like the way that it says it in the NIV here. It says the pattern of this world. Now, listen, I am not in any way, form, or fashion a seamstress or any of those things, but I have seen Tiffany and I have seen my grandmother and my mom when I was younger. They would take material. They'd go to Walmart or they'd go to, do what? Well, Hobby Lobby wasn't back then, all that. But anyway, they'd go somewhere. You understand. They'd go get material. And they'd buy the pattern of the dress that they wanted or whatever it was. And they would buy the pattern and they would take and they would place the pattern. They'd put it on the material and then they would cut the material to the pattern. Then they would take that and they would sew it together and it would become a shirt or pants or skirt, whatever it's going to end up being, right? So when Paul is saying don't be conformed to the pattern, what happens is the world wants to take their pattern and place it on our lives and cut us out to make us look like them. That's the world's desire. Now, you're not going to go ask somebody, do you want to make me like you? They're not going to go, yes. That's kind of a goofy question or thought. But the understanding is that Paul is saying, in order not to be conformed to the world, in order that we might present ourselves as living sacrifices, listen, we can't be in the same image of the world. Conform, the word there means to be fashioned like. I said this earlier. In fact, this was already part of my notes. In days past, they thought that righteousness and or godliness or being a Christian, it was by the way you dressed. And listen, I'm not saying that was 100% wrong, but we allowed that pendulum to swing so far that we said, if you don't dress like this, then you're not righteous. And listen, that's just inaccurate. That's not correct. Now we've moved away from that, and you don't see that as much anymore. You know, you got to wear skirts because only skirts are godly and those kind of things. Listen, if that's what you want to do, that's your business. I'm just saying that doesn't make you more or less of a Christian if you do or don't. But the point is that's the way it used to be. Days gone by is you were recognizable because of the way you wore or what you dressed in. And can I tell you something? An external change without an internal change is only hypocritical and confusing. Can I say this? And I say it sadly. I say it only because from my own experience, because it won't be the full gamut. But from my own experience, I've had people or seen people that have come out of that. And mom and dad are fine, but Susie and Johnny are running from God because they didn't want to have anything to do because mom and dad, they would say this in front of everybody else, but they lived differently behind the closed doors. And even though they dressed differently, their life wasn't any different. And Sonny and their son and daughter, all right, they saw the hypocriticalness of it. And they ran from the church believing, well, that's what Christianity is. I don't have anything to do with it. That's the sad part of it. Like I said, some of you probably recognize that. Hey, listen, it happens both ways too, though, so I don't want to just throw a single rock in that direction. I'm just saying, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world. One of the things that happens when we start talking about that is grace becomes the trump card, the toleration card. Well, we're under grace. And can I tell you, I thank God we're under grace. But grace is not a license. It's not a license to sin. Well, I can sin because God will forgive me. Listen, if that's your understanding, then you need to get a better understanding of what the Word is saying to us. Grace is not a license, but it's a standard. And it's a higher standard even. Why do I say that? Because Jesus would say in the Old Testament, now this is the SRV, this is Scott Russell version, but to give you a picture of it, Jesus would say in the Old Testament, Scripture would say, adultery is a sin. I say, if you look on a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart, and that's sin. Well, grace calls us to a higher standard than what the law calls us. So it's not a license to sin. Grace is a standard by which we live. And so when we say, I'm not going to be conformed to this world, because remember, this is where we're going for just this moment, is don't be conformed to this world. And people go, well, God knows that I struggle with this and this, and this. And listen, grace is not a license, but God has called us not to be conformed to the world. I'm not talking about, well, do you have an Apple iPhone or not? I'm not, listen, come on, don't go off over there. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, the pattern is the way we're going to live our lives, what our lifestyle is going to look like. Oh, this is what the world does, and this is what we do. And so there was a Christian fraternity at a state university. Almost an oxymoron, right? Christian fraternity, state university. Somebody will catch that after a while, but the fraternity had a solid reputation for being a group of solid young Christian men with high standards of acceptance. You had to have a pastor's recommendation to be in the fraternity. You had to have regular church attendance, was encouraged at least somewhere, and was expected. They did a lot of community service projects, held regular group Bible studies. In the early years, many young men solidified their relationship with Christ as members of that fraternity. It was truly a great organization because Jesus was at the core of everything they believed in. Now, mom and dad, hey, listen, we'd read that and we'd go, oh, I'd love for my son and daughter to go to a university where they could get into some type of group like that. Fraternity, sorority, whatever. It's Christ-centered. And they have one. It's called Chi Alpha. Anyway, that's a plug for them. But anyway, so here's this fraternity. They, godly organization. But this fraternity was also a bit of a laughingstock around campus. They were considered wimpy because they didn't drink and have wild parties like the other fraternities. They were mockingly called a bunch of goody two-shoes, and they were often the butt of college pranks. One year they decided to do something to change their image on campus. They were tired of being known as the wimps and weirdos. They wanted respect, so they decided to give their fraternity a makeover. They began their makeover by changing their name. They took out all references to Jesus in their name and all of their literature. Their Bible studies became optional, and it was just a matter of time before they stopped having them at all. They also stopped doing community service projects. It was not long before they started to loosen their high standards a little. They stopped requiring a pastor's recommendation for acceptance. In fact, you didn't even have to be a Christian to join. Their standards continued to loosen, and they began to tolerate non-Christian behavior. Things continued to evolve. In less than 10 years, that once strong Christian fraternity regressed to the point of becoming just like every other fraternity on campus. They had just as many wild parties, and the reputation around campus was just as wild as that of the other frat houses. They wanted to become like the rest, and they did. Paul is calling the church not to be conformed to the pattern of this world. Now, I understand this. Without getting too far into it, listen, I understand. In high school, I was one of those wimps and weirdos. I was one of those guys that stood up for Christ. This was the crazy thing. I was one of the captains on the football team, and it wasn't that I was the most popular. Because what happened is those captains would come to me behind closed doors and say, "Hey, what should we do?" And it's not that I had to stand out there and go, "Hey, I didn't have to pick it or I didn't have to do anything." The thing was, and the point I'll make this morning is listen, you don't have to compromise. The world wants you to compromise because the world wants you to be like them. Then they don't have to feel bad about the way they live their lives when it's contrary to the things of God. Now listen to me this morning, because I want you to understand something. We've got to learn to step out before we can ever step up for Christ. He says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world. See, the battle to be like everyone else, the world wants us to conform to its image. All the while, God is trying to create His image in us. To be like Christ means that we are not going to be like the world. The leaders in Jesus' time wanted Jesus to fit in their little box. The reason they rejected Jesus as the Messiah, because they anticipated Him looking a particular way and acting a particular way and doing particular things. They thought that He was going to come, as He was going to become, and I used it this way earlier this morning, they thought Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to come and deliver them. I am here. He's not coming that way. He didn't come that way. He didn't come to shoot everybody down. He didn't come the way that they thought He was going to be. He didn't fit their mold. He didn't fit their image. He didn't fit them. And because He didn't fit it, they rejected Him. There is going to be a day He's going to come back. And when He comes back, Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to look like this. Because Jesus is going to be, he's going to come back as that victorious warrior. He is going to come back as a warring king, as a reigning. He is going to come back that way, but He didn't come the first way in that way. And because of it, the Jewish people couldn't accept Him because He didn't conform to their image. In fact, the Jewish leaders, as we would see in the beginning of the church, and we could say this today, but in the beginning, the Jewish leaders tried to get the early church to conform. In Acts chapter 4, it's talking of Peter and John. It says, and they had called them, talking about the Jewish leaders, called them and commanded them not to speak at all or teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered and said to them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than God, you judge. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. Can I tell you something? The church needs some Holy Ghost boldness. The world needs to see a true representation of Christ, of a Christian, one that is not compromised, casual, or complacent. See, far too long we have morphed into something we think would attract the lost. And the truth is we have only compromised our testimony and our families thinking we could win them on their terms with our ideas. And in order for us to be the church that God has called us to be, in order for us to make Him known, can I tell you something? It's not going to be because we come up with some great new scheme or great idea. It's when we come into the image of Christ and allow His image to be fashioned in us. Then we become a light to the lost. See, a living sacrifice, the sacrifice is killed. They killed the sacrifice for the purpose of the sacrifice. And Paul says to offer our lives as a living sacrifice. In other words, that is to present ourselves already dead. Hey, a sacrifice doesn't go, hey, wait a minute, not right there. For some reason, I remember, and I'll pick on my sister because she's not here. But I remember when we were growing up and Dad would get that black belt that had the two little prongs on it, man, you could hear the buckle coming down the hallway, and it was rapture practice. Please, Jesus, come get me. Anyway, but my sister and I would be in trouble, more so her than me. And I'd always hear her. Dad say, okay, bend over. And she'd go, but wait a minute, no, can we talk about this? But wait a minute, Dad. And then he'd get ready. Oh, but wait a minute, Dad. And I'm just like, just bend over and take it. It's done. But a living sacrifice, at least in this, my sister was a living sacrifice. She wanted to have her ideas. Don't hit, right? That's not what a sacrifice does. A sacrifice is sacrifice. It doesn't have no right. It has no voice. It has no opportunity to argue the point. Well, wait a minute. don't take me. A sacrifice dies. And he says, be a living sacrifice. That is to present your body, or to present yourself already as dead, but in complete submission to Christ. Not being conformed to this world's opinion or standards, but conforming and aligning to God. So how do we do that? Well, Paul says this. He says, be transformed. He says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformed. The word, if we look at it in the Greek, it's where we get the word metamorphosis. It's being changed from one state or condition into another. It's the idea of when a caterpillar goes to the butterfly. It changes. And in all of that, it changes from one form or one body to another body. It goes from that ugly old worm that the girls scream about to, you know, if we just tell them, hey girls, you realize that's just a caterpillar. Oh, don't touch it, don't touch it. But the truth is, it's changed. It's transformed. And Paul's saying, be transformed. Not into our own image, not into the pattern of the world, but be transformed into His image. Last week, I had this last Sunday morning, and I said this last Sunday, but I want to say it again, only because it was just one of those moments. I don't know if you've ever had this where I felt like the Lord just dropped something in my spirit. I mean, it was like, wow, we were praying, Melody Bolo and I were praying before the first service, and I just felt like the Lord dropped this in my spirit about it. I said, let's create man in our image. That's what God said. Go read it in Genesis chapter 1. God said, let us create man in our own image. Let's fashion him in the way we are. Sin, when it came into the world, it ruined the pattern. It ruined the image, at least in regards to us. So when in our own personal lives, when we come into personal discipleship, I told you this last week, and you got to get this. It's not about education, it's not about information, but it's about transformation. Because if it was about education and information, then the Jewish people would have been fine. Because in John chapter 5, Jesus says, you diligently study the Scripture. It wasn't about information. It wasn't about education. He says, but you deny the one that it points toward. It's about transformation. And so when we come into a relationship with Christ and say, Lord, will you disciple me? Will your Spirit teach me? Listen, we're being transformed now into His image. Why? That's what discipleship will do. Calls us to become like Christ. It's us now stepping back in to right alignment, proper alignment with God, and allowing Him to transform us. So when Paul says be transformed, it's not just so that we can change from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Not in that sense, but we're being changed from being lost to being found, to being sin to being righteous. It's not in our ability, it's not in all the things that we know, but it's the transformation that God takes us through. So he says, be transformed. He says, by renewing. The word is to renovate. The word renewing there means to renovate. Can I tell you this morning, it's time for a makeover. Do y'all like that? The makeover thing that they own houses, we like that because at the end we like to cry. Oh, that's so nice. And then it goes off and you're mad. I wish God would let me have a makeover. And I'm telling you this morning, you can have a makeover. You can renovate your mind. Not for the purpose of dressing up, but to renovate the way we think and think about Christ and how we follow Christ. Our mind, or your mind, is this: your intellect, your thoughts, your will, your feelings, and your affections. So he says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed, be metamorphosized by the renewing, by the renovation of your mind, will, thoughts, and affections. Can I tell you something today? It's not mind over matter. Because mind over matter is only as good as I'm continuing that mantra. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. But when I'm not doing that and encouraging myself that way, then I'm back to, well, I can't. And the truth is when we come to Christ and He transforms us, then when we sing the song, I am yours, listen, there's a transformation that takes something on the inside of us. No longer do I walk around and go, well, nobody likes me. I guess God's mad at me. No, that's the world's pattern. That's poor thinking, because God loves us. Transforms us. So I think a great illustration of this, or a good picture of this being taking place, is in Daniel chapter 1. I love the story of Daniel. If you've never read Daniel, I encourage you. It's in the Old Testament. And it says this in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. I love the way it says it in New King James. It says, he purposed in his heart. Daniel purposed. I like the word resolved. It's okay, but I don't know. There's just something about when I read it and what it means to me. Is that he purposed in his heart. He made it wasn't just a little decision. It was a determination. He made a commitment in his heart that he would not eat the royal food and wine. Now listen, the pattern of this world thinks like this. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. In fact, we have a little saying, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. Has anybody ever heard that? Anyway. That's the pattern of the world. Here's Daniel. He's in captivity. He's been captured. He wasn't there because of his own sin. He was there because of the sin of the nation. God had said, you're disobedient and you rebel against my commands. This is what will happen. The other nations around you will come and they'll take you, in a sense. That's what he said. So Daniel finds himself in Babylon. First test. They bring him pork chops. Right? Pork chops, pig. Jews don't eat pork. You know, you get that? You understand that? So they're bringing in pork chops. And all the king's delicacies. Daniel purposes in his heart, I'm not going to sin against God by eating the food that is not right for me. What we do a lot of times, sadly, when I say we, I'm not talking about the Destiny Center. I'm just talking about other believers, lives every place else, goes to those other churches and things. But the point is that we go, well, who's here? Who's going to know? At work, who knows? I'm the only believer. I'm the only Christian, so who knows? Who's going to say anything to anybody? And that's the pattern of the world. That's what the world does. Well, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, what's it matter? If they don't find out, then who cares? But Daniel, it says, he purposed in his heart, I'm not going to sin against God. That food is not for me. I'm not going to eat it. And here's an amazing thing about the story. It says that the eunuch that was over them, the person that was over them, that Daniel had received favor. In verse 9, now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. And so Daniel just says, hey, listen. Let's do this. Oh, and I love the whole story about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and all those. But he says, listen, just try it out for 10 days. If it's not good at the end of 10 days, okay, I'll eat your food. That's the way I recognize that. That's not exactly what it said, but that's what I see. Because he says, try us out. Test it for 10 days. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the 4 Hebrew children, they are there. They take away the pork tenderloin and all the king's delicacies, the blizzards, and all. So they take it away, and this is where we get the idea of the Daniel fast, in which it says they ate vegetables and drank water. And so it says at the end of the 10 days that the man that's over them comes back, and he recognizes that they are healthier looking and everything than those that had been eating pork tenderloin. And so they take all that food away. I love that part of the story because I just can imagine what's happening. Because, man, I've seen this happen before in different situations. Like, man, why did you say anything? Now we got to eat all these stinking broccoli. What's this all about? And I had pork tenderloin yesterday. It's your fault, Daniel. Anyway, that's the way I see it. It's funny. But Daniel, who had received favor from God. Listen, God in His sovereignty, God in His providence allowed Daniel to be where Daniel was. Well, God could have saved him. He could have. And you know something, and you and I know this. God can save us from a lot of things, but there's a lot of stuff that He allows us to go through. And we can sit back and moan and groan, oh God. But if we'll step back and remember, I am yours. And if I'm yours, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Listen, I have a confidence in Christ. Even in the midst of all hell breaking loose and the chaos, I can have this confidence in Christ, knowing that He's going to take me through it. He's not going to leave me back there. He's going to walk He's going to walk beside me in this thing. But listen, to have that confidence, you can't be conformed to the world's image. You can't say, well, hey, what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. What happens at work stays at work. Listen, I'm going to tell you something. We can't be conformed to the image of this world, but we have to be conformed to the image of Christ. And so Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself. See, God was sovereign. Can I tell you this morning? God will still and can still accomplish His will no matter what your captivity may look like. God's will is always greater than man's opinion. So God is sovereign. But understand this today, that God is able to keep us in the middle of the moral dilemma that we face. Just as He helped Daniel in the middle of the moral dilemma of Babylon, He can help you and me. Can I tell you something this morning? We live in the modern day Babylon. I don't know if you recognize that, or I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but listen, Babylon was a pagan nation. They did not serve God. But can I tell you something? Even in the midst of that, we see Daniel saying, I'll not defile myself. I'll not bow my knee. In fact, if you go ahead and continue to read in Daniel, you'll come across the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when Nebuchadnezzar would build the statue in honor of him. And he would say, at the music, at the beginning of the worship service, we want you to bow your knee to this idol. And they said, we will not. And if you'll remember the story, they get thrown into the fiery furnace. Listen. God puts you in the middle of those things and carries you through the middle of those things so that He can show up. See, the reason we need to step out so we can step up so that God can show off. God will use our difficulty to show off His mercy and to show off His grace and show off His faithfulness and show off His goodness to us today. See, our decision not to be conformed to the world is not a one-time decision. It's a continual decision. It's easy when you're at church and the pastor's all revved up and everybody's, yeah, that's good. It's easy on Sunday morning, but on Monday afternoon when the boss comes to you and says, hey, listen, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, we're going to take off early and we're going to go down to such and such place. We're going to go do drinks. The drinks are on the office. It's easy when you're in the midst of believers, of people saying this is the way we believe and this is the way we're going. But when you get out in the middle of Babylon, how are you going to stand? What are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, nobody's going to know. Well, I just need to be a witness. Can I tell you something this morning? Jesus never drank to be a witness. He didn't conform to the image of the world. He didn't conform to the patterns of the world. But what He did is He stepped out so that He could step up and that He could show off. So listen, when we make that decision every day, in every moment, in every situation, you know, Pastor Scott, it's easy for you. You're a pastor. You don't face all that. And can I tell you something? There is some agreement to that. But you know something? I hadn't been dead for 46 years. I went through high school, public school. I faced stuff. I faced the alcohol. I faced the drugs. I faced the situations with the foo-foo sitting in the desk next to me saying, hey, cutie. I'm like, hey, no, back up. So it's not like, well, you don't understand. Listen, there are things that I don't understand. I agree. I can sympathize in that. But can I tell you something today? That you still have to make a decision. Am I going to live for God in Babylon? Am I going to be conformed? Am I going to be changed? Am I going to be like the pattern of the world? Or am I going to be conformed to the image of Christ? See, because when we step out, here's what will happen. It'll set you apart. Others may not understand it. They may not even support you. Your family may not even support you. But can I tell you something? This is what's going to happen. When you step out, it's going to set you apart. Well, I don't want to be different. I don't want everybody to look at me. I don't want... Listen, if Daniel doesn't step out, I don't know. Looking at Scripture, but if Daniel doesn't step out, does God show up? If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego don't go, okay, we'll bow. If they don't step out, does God show up in the midst of the fiery furnace? See, when they did that, Nebuchadnezzar was like, didn't we throw 3 in there? And there's a 4th. And the 4th one is in the image of God. The image of the Son of God. Jesus is in the middle of that with them. Come on, church. When they stepped out, God stepped in. And so the thing is it's going to set you apart. It gives you a chance to practice your faith. Well, I don't like practicing my faith. It's hard. Yes, it's hard. Growing up is hard. Living is hard. But we step out so that we can practice our faith. Not everybody's going to stand there behind you and go, oh, that's great. Good job, Corey. Way to go. Not everybody's going to do that. I understand those things. But are you trying to please man, or are you trying to please God? Listen, the reason we step out to step up is not so that everybody around us will go, oh, that was great. You did a great job, Scott. Now I'm doing it so that I can please Him. So what happens is it gives us a chance to practice our faith. I'll ask you this question. Is an unchallenged faith really faith? But when you step out and step up, it'll set you apart. It gives you a chance to practice your faith. But here's one of the last things. It says it will give God the opportunity to show up. See, in our mindset, we think, well, if God will show up, then I'll stand up. If God will show up, then I'll... It doesn't work that way. It takes us stepping out in faith and then God coming and taking us. It's us stepping off that cliff, stepping off that edge, stepping out of the boat. It's us telling the prophets to say, hey, keep bringing water, like Elijah did on the Mount Carmel when he would fight the 900 false prophets. And he said, bring the water, and whichever God consumes this with fire, that's the true God. Listen, he had to stand out, step out and step up so that God would show up. And I'm telling you today, the reason we want Him to show up is so that He'll show Himself off, to make Himself known. Because when we step out, He will show up. I believe that God is looking for someone to step out so that He can show up. My thought is let it be us. Let it be us. I'm not saying it's easy. I recognize it's not easy. But I'm going to tell you something. If we'll step out, if we'll be the courageous, I'm going to just tell you something. If we'll be courageous enough to step out, you'll be surprised how many people will step in behind you. You'll turn around and go, what are you doing? Well, I'm a Christian too. You're a Christian too? Really? Now don't condemn. Don't do that. Don't go, whoa. What church do you go to? Yeah, you're undercover. You're Secret Service, aren't you? Nobody would ever know. But the point is, listen, if you'll step up, I'm telling you right now, there's going to be somebody who's going to step in behind you. And if nobody does, I'll promise you this, the Lord will step in behind you. Says, I'm here to fight your battle. I'm here to walk with you. I'm here to go through all the things that you're going to face. I'm here to go through them with you. And so let's be that church. There was a young girl that once consulted with her minister, and she says, I cannot stick it out any longer. I am the only Christian in the factory where I work. I get nothing but taunts and sneers. It's more than I can stand. I'm going to resign. Excuse me. So the minister asked her, where do they place lights? And so the girl, kind of flustered by that, really kind of bluntly says, what does that have to do with anything? And he said, no, listen, just answer my question. Where do they place lights? She said, I suppose in dark places? Yes, and that is why you've been put in that factory where there is such spiritual darkness and where there is no other Christian to shine for the Lord. The young Christian realized for the first time the opportunity that was hers. She felt she could not fail God by allowing her light to go out. She went back to the factory with renewed determination. She had purposed in her heart determination to let her light shine in that dark corner. Before long, she was the means of leading 9 other girls to the light. We step out to step up so that Christ can show off and show up. Church, I'm telling you today, the world needs to see a true representation of a follower of Christ. Someone that's not compromised. Someone that's not, like I said, I'm not saying that we're perfect. We're not perfect. We all recognize that. But listen, someone that'll stand boldly without compromise, would stand without being casual or complacent about their walk with Christ. I had a friend of mine when I was growing, I went to high school with him. Went and saw him at our 5-year reunion. I knew his family. His family had attended church. That don't really make other than to say this. He made this statement when I go back at a 5-year reunion, or 5 or 10, whatever it was. He'd probably put on about 30 pounds. And he's standing there with a beer mug in his hands, and he goes, "I'm a social drinker." And I walked up and patted him and said, "Yeah, you look really social." Of course, I did that because he had grown up in church. He had said, I follow Christ. And listen, I'm not sitting here so much condemning that other than to say this. Listen, we can be undercover. We can be conformed to the pattern of the world and say, well, I want to be like them so that I can win them. You won't win them. When you compromise, you will not win them. I know that's what the world says. Well, we got to be like them so that we can have something in common with them, so that we'll understand where they're coming from, and we'll understand where they're. And can I tell you that's a lie? What's happening is the enemy wants you to be conformed to the pattern of this world. And Paul says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed, be metamorphosed by the renewing of your mind. Can I tell you today, Christ is looking for someone to stand out. To stand up. So that he can show up. Father, let it be us. Lord, help our witness, help our lives to be as steadfast and as faithful as Daniel, as steadfast and as faithful as Paul. Lord, even in the midst of the society that we live in, a society that disregards you, Lord, give us the faith, give us the confidence, give us the boldness to step out and say, I'm not going to be conformed, and to stand up for your purposes so that you can be made known. Father, I thank you today in your precious name. Amen. As we begin the beginning of the year, with several things that have happened, obviously we're just